In the previous lectures, we have been studying about different aspects of operating system, and what we have mostly seen was the introduction to operating system and also operating system structures. Now moving on, we are moving on to one of the most important parts of operating system, which is process management. So you must have heard this too many times, processes and threats. So in this lecture, we will be trying to get an introductory idea and understanding of what are processes and what are threats. And usually people are confused many times between the difference between processes and threats. So we will try to understand what these are and what are their differences. So first of all, before we understand processes, let us first try to understand how a program is developed. So whenever you want to make a program, what you do is you first write the program in some high-level languages. For example, let's say that you write the program in C, C++, Java, or something like that. And that program is written in a high-level language. Now, we know that at the basic level, computers does not understand the high-level language, but it understands only binary codes, which are zeros and ones. So the program has to be converted to binary code. So for that, using a compiler, you compile your program and it helps to convert that program into a machine code, which is understandable by your machine. Alright, so after that you have your program, which is converted into a binary executable code, and it is ready for execution. But it is not enough to just have that binary code for a program to execute, or for a program to tell the computer what it wants to do. So what it has to do is, it has to be loaded into the memory. And for a program to execute, it needs some resources of the computer system. So who will give the resources? Who will allocate this resources? What is a brain that works behind all this? It is the operating system, which we have been discussing so far. So the operating system will help in loading that executable program into the memory and allocate its resources. And then the program will begin its execution. Alright, so we first have a program which is written and which is ready for execution. But till that time, it is just a passive entity. That means it just sits there without doing anything. But the moment it begins execution, at that instance, we call that program as a process. So a process can be taught off as a program in execution. When a program starts execution, at that time, we call it a process. So when it is not executing, it is just a program sitting there, doing nothing. But the moment it begins execution, at that time, we call it as a process. So in the earlier computers, it supported only one process, or one program at a time. But in today's computer, it supports multiple processes. Multiple programs are running at the same time, and even one single program can have many processes associated with it. So when a program begins as execution, at that time, it is known as a process. Now let's try to understand what are threats. So threat is actually the basic unit of a process, which is in execution. So this is how we can define it. A thread is a unit of execution within a process. A process can have anywhere from just one thread to many threads. So we already understood what is a process. When a program is executing, it is called a process. And a thread is the unit of execution within a process. So within a process, there may be one or more units of its execution, and those units are known as threats. And again, in earlier systems, one process had only one thread, but now a single process can have many threads or many units of execution within it. So a process can have anywhere from one thread to many threads. So that is a difference between the process and a thread. If you look at this diagram, I hope you should be able to visualize and understand what it actually means. So here we call this entire thing as a process. When a program begins execution, it becomes this process. And within this process, there are certain units of its execution, and each unit is known as a threat. So these are all the units, or the threats, which are under execution within this process. Now if you want to see the processes which are in execution in your system, you can see it using your Task Manager in Windows. You can open up the Task Manager, and you can see which are the programs that are loaded and what are the processes which are executing. So let me show you an example of that. So here, this is a screenshot of my If you open up your Task Manager, and if you look at this Application tab, we can see which are the programs that are running. So here I have 3 programs running over here, and here we have the Process tab. So if you click on the Processes tab, you can see what are the processes running in your system. So if you click this, you come to this window over here where you see that there are all this processes running in your system. So for example, if you look here, you see that there is the Chromium browser running over here. And if you look at the Processes tab, we see that there is not only one process associated with this Chromium browser, but there are multiple processes. For example, you see there is Chrome.exe here. It's there even here. And there are quite a few even over here. So we see that there are multiple processes associated with a single program. And this is the memory that it is using, which is shown over here. So this is just an example of how you can see the programs and processes running in your system. Because if you see what is happening, it becomes more interesting for you to learn and understand what is happening. So here we have seen the processes, but we did not see any threats over here. So if you want to see the threats that are also there in your system, then you can use a program known as Process Explorer. You can download the program and it will show you even the threats that are running for each program and for each processes. So this is how the Process Explorer looks like. You can download this. It is a very small application. You can download and install it, and you can see that these are the processes as we saw before. So, for example, here I have the Chrome.exe process running over here. And if you right-click on this and go to the properties, then you can see the threads. So here you will get this window. And if you click on this Threads tab, you can see that these are the threads, which are the units of execution of this particular process, and which are running over here. So this many threats are running within this process, Chrome.exe. So in this way, you can see the processes and tests are running in your system. So I hope with this visual example it was more clear to you what are processes and what are threats and how they work. So this was just a basic introduction of what processes and what are threats and how we can differentiate between a process and a threat. So this process is a very important topic in operating system. And we will be studying this in more details. And many topics are there under this, which we will be discussing in the coming lectures. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.